traditions, or mediocrity? Are you living abundantly?
Health of our society, the future and health of our homes depend largely on how we do what God expects us to do.
Join Dr. Claudius Davis on the Full and Abundant Life program here on WeFM 99.9, Wednesdays 9 to 10 p.m., as he explores the elements that might be robbing you and keeping you from realizing your full potential. It is time to break those chains of bondage. It is time to shake off what's been holding you back. The Full and Abundant Life program, 9 to 10 p.m., every Wednesday on WeFM 99.9 with Dr. Claudius Davis.
Lord, I keep so busy praising my Jesus. Keep so busy praising my Jesus. Keep so.
It's now time for me to turn you over to Dr. Claudius Davis to present to you this evening's Full and Abundant Life radio program. Dr. Davis, good night and welcome to you once again.
Good night, sir, and it's certainly a privilege. I wish you had allowed that song to play.
I just had to be that kind of DJ.
Right. Okay. But it is certainly a privilege to be here tonight. And I'm not sure whether I should give an explanation for last Wednesday night.
You can apologize.
Yeah. I took on another Wednesday situation in mental health, working from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and in mental health, and after 7-8 hours, it takes a lot. So I thought I'd come home, take a little nap, but that nap ended about 11:15, which is after the program. So I do apologize about that. So. I did try my best this evening not to take that nap, so I'm here. So and Kamal, it's certainly a privilege to have you back. I think this is our first program together since you came back.
Second.
Okay, so my memory is.
I came back on the 6th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So certainly I want to again welcome you back, and certainly you were missed, and not that the other guys didn't do a great job, they did, but we certainly like your voice and the kind of things you do here on WeFM. So tonight, as Kamal rightly mentioned, and he certainly gave you the numbers, and we hope that you'll be able to use those numbers tonight, because this is an interactive program, and we certainly would recommend very strongly that you take advantage of that and share your thoughts and your ideas. Now, recently, there's been a lot of concern throughout the Caribbean in particular. And I noticed that in Jamaica, there's a lot of concern about the level of violence in that country, also in Trinidad, and just in general throughout the Caribbean. And so there's a lot of questions as to how we can put a stop to crime. There's people who are pointing to politicians. They feel that we can deal with this maybe in a political way. It seemed like everybody seemed to have an answer to how we can reduce crime and violence. So I thought what I'll do is try to do some programs trying to address the issue, and maybe not directly, but to kind of look more at some of the root causes of crime and violence, and to hopefully, make some suggestions as to some interventions as to how we can have a safer society, a healthier society, so that we all can feel safe and go about doing, what we need to do in terms of making sure our children and ourselves are in fact safe. And so tonight, I want to begin by asking, how can we, detoxify, the broken lives, the mending of broken lives, because ultimately it's not just about the end results of a broken life, what we see in terms of violence and some of the ugliness and the nastiness that we see in our homes, and in our communities. So I want to look at a number of things. So it may take maybe 2 or 3 weeks or even 4 weeks to maybe look at some of the issues that I think may have some contributing factors to this escalation of violence that we're witnessing. So we will look at mental health, the impact of mental health. We will look at the impact of poverty. We will look at the impact, for example, the decline of morality in general, in our society and in our communities, and even globally. But for tonight, I really want to kind of focus more on the purpose, the intention of that's deeply embedded within the Christian values. What is it what is the mission of Christianity? What is the mission of the church? Why did Christ enter into our world? What is the purpose behind all of this? And all of the major religions, seem to be pointing in that same direction, whether it be Buddhism, whether it be Muhammad, Hinduism, Christianity. All of the various religions seem to be the central goal is to create an environment, an ethos where humans can live at peace with each other and truly enjoy life to its fullest. So all of that, even our political systems, our educational systems, our religious systems, all of the various systems seems to have this as the basic goal: to create an environment, to create a society where we can maximize our full potential in a safe and healthy way. And so Jesus highlighted as part of his mission was that we can have life and have it more abundantly. So that's a very big statement when you look at it in John chapter 10 and verse 10. And in that sort of, and it's a statement I think we quote quite frequently. But when you look at it in detail, what Jesus is simply saying that the reason I entered into this world, the reason that I am here, the reason that I am doing what I'm doing, the reason that I will die on the cross, a horrible death, and pointing to the resurrection, all of this was to help you to be able to live out your full potential and to be fully human, to enjoy life and to create an environment around you where you can inspire others, you can infect others to begin to live out their reality. We were engineered by God for a specific purpose. And certainly that purpose wasn't to kill each other, to rob each other, to rape each other, to oppress each other, to exploit each other, to marginalize each other. That's not the purpose. The purpose of the coming of Christ was to create a community, a society where people can begin to live and in harmony with each other, to enjoy each other, to love each other. That is the purpose of, and that's the mission, by the way. That is the mission of the church. That is the mission of what the early New Testament disciples were about. And certainly we are to be a continuation of that. Jesus came, he preached, he died so that he can create that ethos, that community. And so when he talks in Matthew, for example, Matthew 16, when he says, upon this rock, I build my church and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. He was talking about a community. And that community, of course, has, must start with the nuclear family. So it's not just, sometimes we tend to separate out the nuclear family from the church. And sometimes not only do we do that, which is really an injustice, but we also go further by placing the church to be a particular building at a particular location. So, for example, the Methodist Church in Kingston, for example, is at a particular location. The Catholic Church is at a particular location. The building that is at a particular location. The whether it be the Seventh Adventists, the whatever grouping, we tend to more look at the building, the location, and point to that as the church. Really, that's not what it was talking about. Jesus was talking about taking up residency in each individual so that we become the naos of God. We become the temple of God. We become the ecclesia of God, the called out ones. And so this particular called out group of people are special in the sense that there's a reactivation of what was lost, which I'll try to demonstrate earlier in the Garden of Eden, because there was perfect harmony with God and man, and something went wrong. And Jesus came as a correction to that. And part of that correction is that we will have life, and Jesus, in his words, that you can have life, the full and abundant life, which is the part of our program, which is the title of our program, the full and abundant life, which means that we will become fully human. And so what the purpose of mom and dad, the purpose of the home, is to help that child, that infant, to develop into the kind of person where he or she will begin to live out that full and abundant life, but in all of their interaction. So when you start talking about how to reduce crime and violence, we really have to begin to go back as far back as we can, and then to begin to understand the whole goal of Christianity, the whole goal of Christian education. And the goal of Christian education is to help us to internalize that spiritual value by, first of all, not just the value, but by internalizing Jesus himself, where we become colonized by his indwelling, and certainly we become more and more like him, and we become fully human. So that's kind of, I know it's sometimes you may even see this too detached, and some of you may even think this is a little too abstract when you start talking about concrete ways of reducing crime and violence. So that's basically, part of what I want to be able for us to talk about tonight. And for those of you who are on Facebook, I certainly want to welcome you to our program tonight. Michelle, it's certainly a privilege to have you here with us. Also, there are, and somehow I don't seem to be able to, right, okay. Yolanda, it's certainly a privilege to have you also with us. Good night to you. And Vernice, certainly it's a privilege to have you. Good night to you as well. So tonight, let's try to have this kind of a discussion. And another passage that I want for us to think about as we begin to really talk about how we can detoxify, men broken lives, how we can fix what is broken. How do we do that? Because I think this modern culture that we live in, it's become so toxic that it's destroying the moral fiber of our children, of our society itself. It's like an erosion, and we don't seem to be able to somehow stop it. And so what I want us to do is to be able to apply some of these biblical principles. And I know that there are those of you who may feel that the Bible is obsolete, the Bible is a man-made book, that the Bible is sort of a what should I say? Those of us who believe in this book is really being deceived. And there are those who would even go to the extreme of saying that Jesus was a fraud, Jesus doesn't exist. And so we know we have all of those kinds of voices. But tonight, let's not look at those kinds of distractions, but rather let's look at the core of society, because I think every civilization has always had at its core a higher being. And so that if we're going to have a civilized society, we have to have something that's outside of ourselves, a guiding principle, so that we can measure ourselves with. And I think that's what Christianity has done. And I think that's what Jesus was all about. So Jesus, in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 to verse 30, he extended an invitation. And the invitation says, "Come unto me, all who are weary and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn." And I like that phrase, learn of me. That's the whole goal of Christian education. That is the goal of mom and dad in terms of raising that infant, is to be able to present to them or to model to them this whole internalized process, which is Jesus in you. Remember, John puts it so well when he said, and I like this, and people think you're always quoting this verse. I have some verses that I always love to quote because they mean so much to me. And in First John chapter 4 and verse 4, it says, "Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world." And to me, that's a very powerful statement. I think it has psychological ramification in terms of our schema, in terms of how we see ourselves when we start talking about hopelessness and helplessness and meaninglessness, where people go even to the extreme of committing suicide, ending their life because they feel life is no longer worth living. Or some others may take the path of substance abuse, reckless living. I was thinking, sometimes I get sidetracked. I was thinking about, I was listening to one of the programs there in St. Vincent this week, where they were talking about the minivan drivers and how reckless people can be. And I was thinking about that. And I said, and I wanted to call in. Actually, I wanted to call in, but I figured they would have recognized my voice, probably they St. Vincent. So I sort of disciplined myself, and I didn't. But I wanted to set this scenario that if you get a young man, 25-year-old, 23-year-old, and you give him a new minivan to drive, and he is a guy who was partying maybe all weekend. He's tired. And so Monday morning, school opens, so now he's picking up transporting children to school. But in order to wake himself up, because he's been out partying all weekend, to wake himself up, he decides he's going to get himself some coffee. But he also smokes. Maybe he doesn't just smoke cigarette. Maybe he smokes weed. So in order to wake himself up, he gets himself some coffee, put some sugar in the coffee, but also he remember his mom has some donut in the kitchen. So in order to grab something quick to eat, he went and he grabs a donut as well. So now he's got the cigarette or the pot, whatever he's smoking, right? Then he gets himself the coffee, which is the caffeine, right? And then he pours some sugar in the coffee because he likes sugar. And then he gets some donut. But here's another piece. But he forgot to take his bipolar medication. Hasn't been taking, well, he couldn't fill the prescription. He didn't have enough money to fill the prescription. So he didn't take any. But he's in a manic phase at this point. So now he add a little caffeine in his system. He adds some sugar in his system. Then he add some nicotine in the system. And now he gets in the van, okay? And now he's loaded with passengers. This man, I don't want to be in the road at that moment with this driver. I don't want to be on the road because he is a missile. He's a weapon at this particular. He's racing, and now he has a vehicle, and especially he's playing loud music, and then there are kids in the van who is encouraging him to go faster. Can you imagine? Would you want to be on the road that day with such a driver? So I wanted to say that because sometimes I want people to begin to understand when we start talking about, how do you get drivers to control themselves? How do you get drivers to respect others, to respect the road, to respect the limits of the vehicle that they're in? And when you get a vehicle up, with that much weight in it, in those fast corners, and you start mashing that brake, that's a fireball that's really running there. But if you have all of those things that I'm saying, he's racing, he didn't take he has a bipolar disorder, he hasn't taken his medication, he's got some coffee in him, he's got sugar in him, he's got nicotine in him, he's got all. Do you want to flag that van down? If you have all of this information in advance, would you flag that van down and get in it? So what I'm saying to us is we have to understand that part of this process has to do, when we start talking about how do we reduce crime and violence, we have to, it's a holistic approach. Just like I give you that example with that driver, you'll be surprised how many drivers are out there driving with all of the things that I just said to you. And if you add inexperience with that as well, they are a missile flying. And if they make it from Spring Village or Richmond to Kingston, it's a miracle when they get there. If they get there safely, it's a miracle. And usually, I would say every day there's a miracle. When those people get to where they want to go safely, it is a miracle. Because an accident is not, it is something that you expect would happen with that kind of what I just described. And so the point that I'm making from all of this, that when we start thinking about the reduction of crime and violence, we have to begin to think in a holistic way. And part of that thinking has to be what Jesus has put forward before us. That is, in order for man to be truly human, where we can begin to respect boundaries, where we can begin to respect each other, where we can begin to use common sense and good sound judgment in all of our interaction with others, we have to begin to take a serious look at what Jesus said, what his mission was to so that we can have life and have it more abundantly. And that secondly, he has invited us, he has extended an invitation to each of us when he says, come unto me all that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And Jesus even went on to say, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. You know what we say? Jesus is simply saying, I'm not putting any extra burden on you. You're not going to, it doesn't cost you anything to be, realize it's cost you more to be indecent and ugly and oppressive and nasty than it is to be nice. It doesn't cost anything to be nice, but it costs a whole lot more because you do a whole lot of damage. Think about the lives that you destroy. Think about the people that you hurt, including your own life, your own children, your own spouses. It costs you more to be nasty than in fact to be good. So, Yolanda, traffic policing will be beneficial in helping to get these reckless drivers off the road. And certainly that is true. And that was some of the recommendations that some of the folks put forward this morning, and rightfully so. But also, I was thinking, Yolanda, that it might be some of the minivan drivers need to be more responsible. I mean, the owners rather, more responsible in terms of screening out some of these people that they're hiring. And it might not be stretching it too far by making sure that these young drivers, before you hire them, make sure that they have a mental health evaluation. Making sure that these people the police departments do that before they hire someone. I hope they do the same thing in St. Vincent. They go through a whole battery of psychological testing to be sure that, that they're fit, that there aren't certain things in the background. And so some of these drivers, especially when we expect to have our school children every morning, getting in vans with these individuals, you would think that the van owners themselves would take a little effort to ensure that these drivers are not only capable of driving a van, but that they are able, psychologically fit and able to get behind the wheel and be able to transport people as well. And so that may require having a psychological inventory that some of these drivers can go through. And some of you maybe say that's a violation. That's going too far. But I don't think it is. Pilots have to do the same thing, right? We are pilots. They go through the same process. They take urine testing. They do psychological testing. So the police officers have to go through the same thing to make sure that they're capable, that the elevators are going all the way upstairs. Why would you not want to know that the elevator for the driver that you trust your life and your children to, that his elevator is going all the way upstairs. That this is not a guy who is with a bipolar disorder who has failed to take his medication. I'm not saying you ought to penalize people for mental health, but you want to make sure that people are complying and that they're following and they're doing what they're supposed to do in order to protect themselves and to protect others as well. So that's kind of what, I think, I think it wouldn't be too far fetched for police officers to be able to try do some stops and make sure, do breathalyzer tests to make sure that some of these drivers are not drunk or haven't been drinking. That wouldn't be stretching it too far to do that. But some people, I guess, might feel that that's a violation of rights and we shouldn't be doing all of this thing. But when we start talking about protecting our children, protecting ourselves, we can't just allow ourselves to be victims of because we need the transportation. We have to get to work. We have to get from point A to point B. And in order to do this, we want a reliable system. So we may have to do some things, Yolanda, in order to certainly make that happen. So, and I appreciate that. So, but what I want us to do though, in all of this, is to take a wider look at why things fall apart. And part of that is you have to start with why Jesus came into this world. You cannot get around that. And he came here to give us a better opportunity to be who we need to be. So the Christian home, the local Christian community, the fellowship, are both healing and empowering communities. And that's important for us to understand. I believe that the local assembly, the local congregations, the nuclear family, that they're all healing and empowering community. That's where our children find their salvation. That is where our children build their self-esteem. That's where our children get the strength, the self-efficacy that they need, the sense of worth, the self-esteem that they need. And that comes from the nuclear family. And of course, the local congregation, create also an environment in order to nurture that. And all of that happens. And so if the church, the local churches, the local assemblies, if they do their job well, and if the home is doing its job well, I believe that in of itself would ultimately result in the reduction of some of the nastiness and the ugliness that we see within our communities. But that's a longer process, of course. There's no quick fix to this. You can see that right off the bat because you have to nurture this. That infant will sooner or later become an adolescent and then an adult. And the foundation is there. And so what we're talking about, a lot of van drivers within that, the 20s, early 30s, these are people who are nurtured a certain way. And so we have to begin to understand and look far back for some of those things to begin to understand why we're having some of the problems that we're having in our homes. Why do we have domestic violence? Why do we have murder? Why do we have all of these things? It's because, the church is failing and because the home is failing. Now, you notice in my discussion, I don't necessarily talk about, that the political system is what's failing. I don't go there. The reason that I don't go there, because the political system is the result of the nuclear family system. It's the home system. If the home raises, politicians are going to be bad because of the way they were raised. Okay. So I'm just saying the character of children and individuals are being shaped in well, Freud may say 5, some may say 3 years. I want to stretch it for 6 years of life are shaped. Then the person's integrity and their character are shaped. So a lot of that's why I don't put the blame on politicians as I am trying to get us to focus on the nuclear family. And I keep emphasizing, someone texted me the other day and said, why do you keep talking about the nuclear family, the nuclear family? What about, what about the single parenting? Yes, I understand single parenting, but I want you to understand that single parenting is in fact a departure from the divine model. So whenever I'm talking more about the divine model, not about the deviation from it, because single parents, single mothers do a great job, and they have a lot, and they still do good work. So it's, for me, when I say nuclear family, it's not a condemnation of those single mothers or single fathers who are raising their children and doing the best that they can. And I'm not necessarily saying that these children aren't going to turn out well and be good citizens and be able to be responsible individuals. That's not what I'm saying. What I want you to know, though, I want to reason from the model, because we want to go back to the model. And the model is you got to have a mom and a dad, not two moms, not two dads. That's not the model. That's a deviation. The model is a mom and a dad and raise children. I'm saying when that is intact and when that is doing well, those children are the benefactor of that union, and therefore they have a greater chance of being able to be responsible citizens and making more meaningful contribution in our society. But I'm saying all of that starts with what Jesus is putting forward here, and he's extended that to us, and he gives us the meaning. So let me just read. I want to read Romans chapter. I want to keep an eye on Kamal is keeping an eye on the WhatsApp there and the messages there. I'll keep an eye on the Facebook people over here. But Yolanda says, but the government can help to put systems in place. For example, a mental health organization who will be able to let me see if I can get all of it here. Who'll be able to monitor individuals with issues, and that is certainly true, because the government can use taxpayers' resources in order to put some of these things in place, and there are some of those things. I think the local hospitals do have social workers there, psychologists there, psychiatrists there, nurse practitioners there, that also provides this, and that takes a lot of funding. So government can use some of the resources, financial resources, to ensure that some of these services are certainly in place, that the psychiatric facilities, that they're well stocked with competent people and the sort of resources that is needed to happen. Also, government can use their resources, Yolanda, to place in each local school district and in each local building resources such as social workers and psychologists and guidance counselors and so on, that will be able to help youngsters. Because sometimes the home will in fact fail, the homes have failed, and there are many single parents, and those single parents have to work. But remember that children spend most of their waking hours away from home within those educational institutions. So government certainly can provide resources to make sure that each building have their own psychologists, their own social workers on the premises, not sharing. And sometimes because lack of resources, you may find that a social worker may have to rotate into different villages. Okay. But in other countries like where I am, before I retired in 2019, the building that I was in, we had about 15 social workers in that building and psychologists in that building, full-time in that building. But then you're talking about resources. And I think a lot of third world countries, such as SVG, probably don't have that kind of financial resources to be able to equip each of the building with their own psychologists and their own social workers. The building that I was in even had a mental health, had a psychiatrist, a nurse practitioner who did all just the mental health. I'm not talking about the nursing, because we had a whole nursing section as well, but we also had a mental health, which is we had a psychiatrist, we had a social workers, and all that they dealt with was the mental health issue right on the premises. So you didn't have to go home. So kids who were on medication, for example, they didn't have to go see an outside provider. Everything was provided within the building that I was in. Okay. And I've been doing that for like 27 years. So I know that. But what I'm saying, Yolanda, is that small countries don't have that kind of a resource, financial resource, to be able to stock each school building with those kind of resources. So so yes, they can, but and true, it should be. But what it means is that it may mean that taxpayers may have to cough up a little more money, and then they're going to complain, once the government said we need a little more money for this. So that's a whole another piece, Yolanda, on that. Okay. But yes, it is true that the government, Stephanie, good night as well. But it is true that the government can make a difference. But I'm saying they can only do so much, because it's still going to come down to the dollars, the resources, and those monies are coming from the taxpayers' pocket as well. And you know how we don't want to pay more taxes. We always want to reduce taxes, don't we? But by reducing taxes at the same time, how are you going to fix your roads? How are you going to have medication in the hospitals? How are you going to have some of these basic things that we're talking about? So those are some of the realistic things. Okay, Yolanda? But anyway, this is an interactive program, of course, and we want to hear not just from the Facebook audience, but also from those of you in SVG as well. Feel free to share your thoughts and your ideas. Let me just give you a passage. I think that's important. It is in Romans chapter 15 and verse 14. It says, and concerning you, Paul is writing to the Roman Christians, and he said, and concerning you, my brethren, I myself also am convinced that you yourselves are full of goodness, filled with all knowledge, and able to admonish. And the word there is the word for therapy. Able to provide adequate, competent, able therapy, counseling to one another. In other words, the Christian community, Paul is simply saying that this Christian community is a therapeutic community equipped with competent counselors that are able to provide healing, guidance, empowerment, inspiration, encouragement to each other within that Christian community. So what I'm saying to us is this. Not only is this ecclesia, this Christian koinonia, this Christian fellowship equipped with competent therapists. The Bible, when I say therapist, it's the Bible use it. That's the word admonish. So you get the word therapy comes from this word. So Paul is simply saying that the Christian believers, that within that community, there are competent people. So I listen to Dr. Richards a lot. I think he's one of the pastors there in St. Vincent. And he is, he gives solid information when it comes to counseling and guidance. He talks about the family. And so, I said if I was in SVG, I would definitely want to be associated with that community, because he pays a lot of attention to mental health issues. And so I'm assuming that within that congregation, that there is that sort of milieu, that sort of environment where people can go and find help, to engage, to enhance their parenting skills, to be able to encourage each other and stimulate each other. And not just that particular congregation, but I'm sure that there are a lot of other congregations on the island of St. Vincent that model this pattern that Paul is talking about, where members can become, that they themselves are therapists, because they have been invested with the power of God through the Holy Spirit and Jesus and the will of God in their lives. So not only can they sit and provide verbal, empathic encouragement and guidance, empowering words, but they can model that, because Jesus is in residency in them, in each true believer. And that's what 1 John chapter 4 and verse 4 says, greater is he that is in you that is in the world. That is, that within you, God is in residence. Therefore, your judgment is judgment that is guided by the Spirit of God. And therefore, you become a person, the vehicle for the communication, the outpouring of God's grace in broken lives. People who are in darkness, you become the light to them. And therefore you can provide the kind of healing that is necessary. So what I'm saying to us is, when we start talking about how we reduce crime and violence, we have to use this model, because this model is a real model, and this model is about the transformation of lives. And so I'm saying that within, if you combine the nuclear family and the local congregation together and pull all their resources together, which is God, the Bible says, where 2 or 3 are gathered, I am there. And Jesus is not there as a passive, person viewing. He is there as the agent of transformation and the agent of change within that ecclesia, within that ethos, within that community, so that lives are being transformed. And so that to me, I think this verse is important for us to get it. So let me give it to you again. Is Romans chapter 15 and verse 4, where Paul says, filled with all knowledge and able also to admonish one another, to provide therapy for one another, to provide biblical, healthy, psychological. Because sometimes, we sometimes people come to me, they call me and say, well, look, we're looking for a Christian therapist. And I say, oh, okay. What do you mean you're looking for a Christian therapist? Explain to me. What do you mean by that? Because I get a lot of referral that way, because people assume that, okay. So, but the point here is counseling, whether or not, once God is in you, it's not about whether it's psychological or spiritual, sociological, whatever. When Jesus is in you, he's going to affect every aspect of your thinking. He's going to make you the kind of person where you're going to have emotional intelligence, self-awareness, where you're going to be aware of who you are, where your boundaries are, so you're not going to overstep. You're going to have a sense of your own weaknesses and the strengths of your strength, and you're going to have a sense of apathy, where you're going to begin to respect each other. That's what leadership is about, and that's what I think the Christian community ought to be about, and that's where the nuclear family, that's where fathers ought to be about, in terms of providing this sort of a counseling, that's sort of a, not only verbally, but in terms of modeling it for their children as well. So let me just check, make sure where we are here on Facebook. Okay. And Kamal, I'm sure we have no comments, otherwise you would have interrupted me. So I'm assuming that we have no comments.
No comments, no callers at the moment.
Okay. So we want to really encourage you to do that. Let me give you another passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. And I like this passage because of what it says. It says, blessed be God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of all mercies and the God of all comfort. And the word comfort there is the word paraclete. It comes from that word, which means to, God stands by our side. He represents us. He pleads for us. That's the whole idea there. Comfort. He is a God of encouragement. He is a God that strengthens. He is a God that stands by our side. Sometimes, we don't, and I think that's one of the one of the difficulties, I think, with many Christians. They see God as somebody who is in heaven. He's so far away. You have to go to him. Sometimes we go to the building, to find God. When we're in a crisis, we have to go to the building because God is locked up in the building. And then you have to call someone to open the building so you can get into the building to have access to God. I want to say to you, that's a delusion. It's an error. It's a satanic strategy, because what you're admitting is that God is not in your home. If you got to go to the building to find God, you're not going to find him, because God is in your home, because God is in you. You carry God to the building because he is within you. And that is something that we need to understand. But that takes faith. That's why Habakkuk says the just shall live by faith. And faith is in 1 John chapter 5 and verse 4, it says faith is our victory. We are winners because of our faith, because we have to believe that God is with us, in us, with us, in us, and for us. So you don't go to building to find him. He is with you always. You don't have to go to Rome in order to discover God. If you're going to go to Rome, take God with you. He's going with you. Because if he's not with you, then you're certainly not going to find him. So in this passage, 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 and 4 says, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, Father of all mercy, and the God of all comfort. Look at verse 4. Who comforts us? 2 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 4. Who comforts us in all of our affliction, so that, I like that phrase, so that we will be able to comfort those who are in affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves have been comforted. That's a beautiful statement. That's a wonderful statement. Let's see if we can unpack this. Let's just park it for a little bit and kind of unpack this passage. Here's what it says. It says, who comforts us in all of our affliction, so that, the reason for this is so that we will be able to comfort those who are in affliction with the same comfort, the same paraclete, the same guidance that God has given to us, the same encouragement that God has given to us. We're going to use that as the bridge to comfort others. Isn't that wonderful? As we have been comforted. So the husband is going to use what God has given to him, the encouragement, the paraclete, the strengthening that God has given to him. He's going to use that to pick his wife up. And the wife is going to use what God has given to her to pick him up. And both mom and dad are going to use what they've got from God to pick their children up. Oh, that is sweetness. that is sweetness. That is, oh man, that is to unpack that. I mean, do you see what I see? Put on the divine lens and see how powerful it is in a Christian home where the man honors God, recognizes the sovereignty of God, where the wife recognizes that. Do you see how those children have that eternal protection in terms of the construction of their character, the construction of their personality, shaped by the same comfort and the encouragement that mom and dad receive from God, that they become the channel that they shower into their parenting lifestyle. Man, hallelujah. That is good stuff. I'm telling you, the home can make a difference in the reduction of crime and violence. What's going to happen out there in the future, what you're putting out there, we can make a difference. You know, we can build more prisons. You know, I was listening to someone send me a little clipping from Jamaica where one of the, in the House of Representatives, one of the representatives was saying, we need to bring back hanging. We need to hang them till they're dead. And he repeated sweet, till they're dead. And he says, we only have one gallows in Jamaica. And we need to have about 4 so that when you go from the courtroom, you don't have to go very far, so that we can hang them dead. And I'm telling you, we don't have to do that if we do what God wants us to do, which is to make sure that our children are being nurtured with the same kind of paraclete that we have received from God. We will create a home, we create our children, we create an environment, a community where we can learn how to honor each other, irrespective of the color of our skin, irrespective of our financial situation, irrespective of our country of origin. we can begin to honor and to respect each other, because we are all children of God. He is our Father. We are all brothers and sisters, and we need to be able to bring that message home, to model that message in our parenting style. We do that in the long haul. This is a long haul process. I'm not talking about a quick fix. This is not a quick fix. This is certainly a long haul situation. And so I believe that we can, in the long run, see a decline in crime and violence if we start doing what parents start doing what they're supposed to do, and the local churches also collaborate together. So if you have the churches collaborating and parents collaborating together and working together, and our educational system become the benefactor of all of that, our government will be the benefactor. They're going to repeat all of that. So a lot of our tax monies are going to be allocated differently. Instead of trying to build prisons, we might be building hospitals. Instead of building, prisons, we might be building schools for our children, fixing our roads. But if we fail to do what we need to do, we're going to have to allocate. Look at what big third world countries, think about their money that they spend. When a young man get into one of these fighter jets, do you know how many fuel that these things are consuming just for an exercise? When they have to leave ground fully loaded with fuel. And if they just go for 10 minutes, they can't land with it. They have to dump all that fuel first before they land. They do this every day. Do you know how much money it takes to keep the Air Force running and equipped and ready? Most of your tax dollars is going just for doing that. Do you think about the amount of resources put into building bombs and researching how we can destroy entire nations with one drop of a bomb? Do you know how many of the brain power, of the financial resources allocated to that? Think about what's happening right now in the Ukraine and Russia, where all of their financial resources are being allocated to destroy each other. After this is done, their healthcare system is going to be challenged. Their educational system is going to be challenged. Their way of life is going to be challenged, because they have allocated all of their resources to destroying each other. That is what we do. And I'm saying that part of stopping that is to start where I am trying to point us tonight. Take a look at the nuclear family. Invest in that. Take a look at our local churches, not just our local churches, but some of our other civic groups, that what they do in terms of mentoring young men, mentoring young girls, all of those, that's where some of our resources needs to go, so that we can begin to build a stronger and a healthier society for our future. Because we're talking about our future. We don't have to have a fatalistic view. And I think many Christians have resigned themselves to a fatalistic view. I don't have to do anything because Jesus is on his way and Jesus is going to be here tomorrow. People have been saying that for over 2,000 years. Okay? We need to do what we need to do to secure our homes and to secure our children. Yes, Jesus is coming. We don't know when. But we need to be busy about our Father's business now by doing what we need to do. And that is part of the education, not only academically, but also modeling it in terms of how we choose to live our lives. So that's a passage that I really want to emphasize. And I hope that I'm just checking my Facebook page here, feed here, to see what some of the comments are. And of course, again, we want to encourage you to give us a wow. Anytime I get going, it's kind of the time kind of just run away with me, because I'm just down to like the second slide actually, and I was hoping to get down tonight to 8, but it seemed like it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen tonight. But I want to be able to continue this discussion. We have 5 minutes in our program to go, and I really want to continue this and to really talk about with the whole caption of how we can really detoxify our society, mend those lives that are broken, so that we can begin to cherish each other, honor each other, respect each other, and so that we don't have to kill each other. When I listen to the feed from the Jamaica politician in the House, they're speaking, and he was throwing some figures out how the escalation of murder in Jamaica is like unacceptable, to the point where he's saying we need to start hanging people, and we need to do it quicker, we need to do it fast, And then there was a piece in it where he says it's so hypocritical because it's on the books. And if it's on the books, why don't we use it, But that's not what I'm advocating. Please don't quote me as advocating that. I'm just saying where people get to their level of frustration and hopelessness that they're beginning to make a prescription advice as to how we can do this. And my suggestion to you tonight is one way to do this is really by going back to the biblical principle, the model that God has certainly given to us. And remember, I'm seeing some things popping up on the screen, but I can't get access to them because I think Sandy is trying to send a text or message, but I don't know where it goes. It pops on the screen and then it vanishes, so I don't know how to find it. But I thank you for sending the message. I just can't have access to it. So, but tonight we have 3 minutes to go, and maybe this is a time for you to call and maybe leave a text and share your thoughts and your ideas. And for those of you who are on Facebook, you can also share your thoughts and your ideas there as well. But I will certainly continue this this program for us, and continue to, because I have a lot to really talk about. Like I said, I want to talk about, the impact of mental health on the home. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about maltreatment, abuse. I want to talk about the impact of that. I want to talk about the impact of poverty itself. I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about the new family arrangement, the impact of step families, how that have an impact on children's psyche, and how a lot of the sexual abuse seem to happen in those kinds of step families that have been instrumental in destroying the lives of children. So I want to deal with a lot of those different topics. But before I get to those kinds of topics, I want to lay some foundation first to really look at it from a divine lens, to look at it from the biblical standpoint of what the solution is, what is God's expectation, what has God done to have a better society, his contribution that Jesus has made, why he died, and how that model is the model that we need to cherish and that we need to follow today if we're going to get ourselves out of where we are into a better place. And I know that those are saying that the world will get worse and worse, and maybe that is true. I think there's some passages for that. But until then, I think we still have the responsibility to do the best that we can to secure our children and to make sure that they're safe and to make sure that they can build the kind of character and the internal integrity that is so critical, so that we can begin to respect and to honor each other. So tonight, I truly want to thank all of you for being a part of the program, and hopefully we can continue this series, next week and a lot more weeks, because like I said, all those different topics I want to be able to deal with, but I may not even get to those topics yet, because I want to first look at it from God's perspective, what God is proposing and what he has said and what his expectations are for that community, that ecclesia, that nuclear family. God has a plan for the nuclear family, and he also has a plan for the ecclesia that Jesus talked about in Matthew chapter 16. So those two things. As a matter of fact, the family is older than the church, and there was specific instruction given to the family And so those instructions are still valid. It says, for this cause a man should leave his mother and father, should cleave together and should be one. That's not going to change. That's the way it is. And that husbands are to love their wives. It's always going to be that way. That we're brothers and sisters. We got to honor each other, respect each other. Don't take another man's wife. Don't steal another man's goat. Don't steal, all of those things are issues that's always there, was always there, and would always be there, and issues that we need to follow. So thank you. I want to thank you, Kamal, for welcome back to the program. And so I want to thank WeFM for bringing this program each Wednesday night. I also want to say that there is another program on Tuesday night. I think it's at 6 p.m. and it's called Scriptural Search right here in WeFM. And certainly on Tuesday night, I would certainly encourage you to be a part of that program on Tuesday night as well. May God bless you. Thank you for being a part of the program. And thank all of you who have tuned in on Facebook. I certainly appreciate your participation. God bless. Bye-bye. See you all next week. Same time, same place.
Thank you very much, Dr. Claudius Davis. We've got 1 minute after 10 o'clock, and you will listen to the Full and Abundant Life radio program with Dr. Claudius Davis. Comes your way each and every Wednesday from 9 until 10 right here on the Clean Fresh Song. God's willing, to join him again next Wednesday right here for another Full and Abundant Life radio program. Well, St. Vincent down the Grenadines, it's also time for me to